Hello, Albuquerque.
In those days, it was 41, so there was a lot of racism.
I'm a Boeing 737 first officer.
I did a lot of research, and I recommend everyone do the same.
And now all of a sudden you're addicted, literally to heroin.
Where were you born? I was born in Cambridge, England.
Both my parents were drug addicts.
Welcome everybody to another episode. Today I have another special guest, as always, my good friend David Mitchel. David, welcome to the program. Thank you for taking the time today. I appreciate you.
I am glad to be here today. Thank you for having me on the program.
Oh, of course, thank you. So I want to start today's program off by talking a little bit about our past history. We met in Santa Fe, New Mexico at an apartment complex. I was working at the labs for my first time. You were doing what you do for your career, and we met in the pool at La Casa Loma Apartments. You had some comments. I'm just going to say for the listener right now, we're re-recording this intro because I kind of had some technical difficulty. We've got Murphy's Law going on with this episode. Everything that could go wrong did. So I kind of lost our intro. So we're going to re-record this. But you had some interesting comments about the pool there at La Casa Loma. What did you say about that?
I liked that pool. One of the things about pools, so that complex was built, it was built in like 1967, 1968. That's when it opened. If you look at pools from basically the pre-1990 era, one of the things that was great about that pool is that it had such a great deep end. It went down to about 10 feet. And you don't see a lot of more modern pools weren't built with as good of deep ends. And I like those. I like those pools that go deep. They're better for diving.
Sure.
If you want to be able to do that, swimming into a deeper end is a good thing. I mean, it takes a more skilled swimmer to do that, because people who are pretty early in swimming, you don't want to get caught in a deep end there.
That's right.
Not be able to swim. That's not there's no good way to spin that one.
Yeah.
But once you can swim, those pools with the great deep end, you can go underwater and go deep into those. That's a lot of fun to do.
Absolutely.
So yes, I appreciated that older style pool, and you mentioned that it was it was heated pretty well, and it takes a lot for even in the warmer summer months. Sometimes a pool does need the water to be heated a little bit,
right,
to feel good.
Yeah, well, and La Casa Loma,
that was a great pool, and it had it was elevated a little bit so that you had a little bit of a view from the patio deck there.
I really liked those apartments. And the AC in those places was fucking phenomenal. I used to get cold as shit in our apartment. We'd have to turn the AC off in the dead of summer. Like, I loved it there. That was a great apartment complex. But I brought that all up to talk about. I remember when I met you in the pool, and you asked what I did, and I told you I was power plant maintenance at Los Alamos.
Yeah.
And I asked you what you did, and you said you were in marketing, and I said, that sounds like money. And I remember you commenting, well, what you do sounds like money too. So we had a commonality immediately. But let's talk about marketing a little bit, and what that entails, and for just say for the beginner out there who knows nothing about marketing, tell us a little bit about your job, and some pros, some cons, a little bit of how it works.
Okay, great. So marketing in its most simple form boils down to four P's. You got product. Everything is a product or service that is that is sold. There's pricing. There's a price for everything. The price of Maker's Mark bourbon is different than the price of Jim Beam, for instance. There's place. That's your distribution. Are you do you sell only online? Do you sell in a mix of stores or online? Where do you sell whatever product or service that you have? And then I saved the best P, what could be considered the best P for last, promotion. That's the P that probably gets the most glory and recognition in marketing. It's whatever communication channels you use to promote your product or service. So you've been hearing a lot more about social media marketing in recent years, using various social media channels to promote brands. A lot of TikTok would be a part of that. YouTube's a part of that. They're
Sure.
all a part of it. So a lot of brands have been using social media in their websites in the last 20 years or so. That's been a change over if you compared marketing now with like marketing in 1980. So the way in which you do those 4 Ps of marketing, that's basically that's what you learn in your first few weeks of like a intro to marketing class in like undergraduate or graduate school, depending on what level you were getting marketing at. And those are important things. Those are fundamental things. Those are the things that make or break a product or service. I've had the ability to work on brands in terms of doing things directly. I've also had the ability to do research, both market research for a third-party researcher or for an internal corporate role in research. Both of those, research and data are facts more so than feelings, and you want to be as objective as you can rather than subjective. We've talked, one of the things that is objective about market research and makes it like science, technology, engineering, mathematics is, it is more data and fact based, because if you look at science and mathematics, there are certain principles that apply in science and mathematics that are objective truths, and you eliminate subjectivity from it. There is a level of subjectivity in brand marketing. It's something that if you're uncomfortable with subjectivity, you're gonna have to find a way to work around. But you can eliminate some of it with objective research to guide brand decisions in certain ways. You can have research about a pricing strategy. You can have research about where to distribute your product, what channels are going to be more meaningful to your customers, what aspects of your products are most meaningful to your customers. Where are you better off? Are you better off advertising your products, in some digital channels versus some traditional channels like billboard, radio, and TV? What's going to be the mix there?
Sure.
Of all of those things? So that's a lot to say about marketing in 5 minutes, and that sort of thing what I just said in 5 minutes, you can spend your entire career on. You can spend multiple classes at either the undergraduate or the graduate level discussing those 5 minutes.
Sure. Real quick, I didn't ask you before, but I'm curious. What does your commute look like daily? How long does it take you to get to and from work? And is it always a necessary commute, or can you do some of your work from home?
So I've had a variety of different commutes over time. In the last 12 and a half years, my longest, there were periods where I had commutes close to about 15, 16 miles. Right now I have a 3-mile commute each
that's
direction.
Great.
It's only 3 days a week.
That's awesome.
So it's not going to be hard from a mileage standpoint on my car, which has value. Certainly I'll put on miles in my leisure time too.
Oh, of course.
But yeah, a shorter commute, especially in a heavy traffic city like Dallas, it's pretty valuable.
Oh, absolutely. Real quick, I want to last thing go over is your podcast history, because you're a seasoned vet when it comes to podcasts. Tell me a little bit about that.
So the first times that I did podcasts were in the earlier days of podcasts, as I was trying to promote myself as a marketing expert and bring in clients to a marketing brand consultancy where I would give guidance to brands. And I was doing that pretty early in my career, and then I did more a return to corporate roles once I got to Dallas. I started going back into corporate in 2013. So I started branding myself as a marketing expert. I started writing blogs about it. My blogs started getting noticed as well.
Nice.
That was the basis for making appearances on podcasts starting in 2009 and 2010. I was on some marketing podcasts. I was able to do some podcasts about just general business topics. I did some sports radio stuff about some sports marketing issues over the years. That was pretty cool to do. So yeah, it's been a variety. There's been a variety of podcasts and terrestrial radio programs that I've done in the last 14 to 15 years. The one thing that I never did was conventional. Never did a guest appearance in conventional broadcast or or cable television. And in certain time with cord cutting, that means less, but it's still pretty exciting today. Like if they make an appearance on CNBC today, they're probably going to put it on their personal YouTube. Hey, check out this 5-minute clip that I did on CNBC.
Right.
So there is still value in legacy media in doing those appearances.
Sure.
I never got to a point where I was deemed important enough to do that, but with all the podcasts and terrestrial radio that I've done in the importance of podcasts as compared to where they were 15 years ago, I think my appearances on various podcasts over the years, speak for themselves, and I'm glad that I've done them, and I'm glad I sort of positioned myself 15 years ago in a space that was growing, and I could sort of tell 15 years ago that it was growing, and I was happy about that. So yeah. I hope to do more podcasts as time goes on.
Well, you're an expert in your field, and to that note, I wanted to ask, is there any kind, like you said, you started out by marketing yourself to grow yourself as a brand. Now, is there any plans in the future to maybe turn yourself into a brand, maybe start your own marketing business or something like that?
So, the hard thing about that is, you can have all of the knowledge that you have about marketing, and you could and I'm in a better place now than when I was doing that in the late 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s. I have more experience in marketing now.
Right.
I'm better equipped to be more successful in that. At the same time, it's to be an independent consultant and try to bring in smaller to medium sized businesses typically as clients. That's a much harder thing to do in bringing in that business.
Sure.
I think I would like, in terms of my personal vision, I see myself, having corporate marketing roles, and we'll get into some of these personal vision things later. But I see myself, having corporate marketing roles. It's a little bit easier to be in an established company than to establish yourself and bring in customers all the time.
No, I hear that.
Some people are people who really enjoy hunting for new customers and,
sure.
and really enjoy having full autonomy in that. But as somebody, and I'll talk about this, I can talk about this a little bit more as time goes on. I like to work to live. So, I mean, being with an established company, and having a pretty established role is something that I enjoy, and something that, I see the importance of the work-life balance and using my work exploits to sort of bring me the abilities to live my personal life and live my leisure time in the way that I want to do that.
That's great. Well, it's impressive the way you can just bring all this stuff up and speak about it so efficiently and make it so understandable and relatable. So it's really cool.
You've got to do that with anything. I don't care what your area of expertise
sure.
is. You've got to find a way to meaningfully connect with people.
Sure.
Because people, I think to some degree AI might affect this, and it might. At this point, it's not advanced enough to really connect as well with humans as is required. And I mean, AI is being used in marketing to some degree right now. It's being used to in the promotion of marketing to help write the content for advertisements, whether they're video, audio advertisements, or just written word, they're being used. But the most important thing is, whatever form of promotion that you're using. We're talking about the promotion key of marketing: video, audio, print. You've got to find a way to tell a story that is captivating to people's attention, and that they want to keep paying attention to you, because attention is a big part of branding.
Right.
And if you tell a compelling story and get people's attention, we're all marketers across all brands are fighting for people's attention. So you've got to be interesting, captivating, and really say how, offer a benefit statement in some way that is going to keep people interested and give people a positive perception of the product or of the branded product or service that you're offering.
And I wanted to remake the comment that I made earlier about, from a consumer standpoint, this is things that you never think of when you're walking through a grocery store or walking through a car dealership or anything. You never think about all of the marketing and sales that goes into this, but all those products are there because of it. They wouldn't be there if there wasn't research done on certain demographics who are going to buy certain products at certain times, and all that good stuff. So it's really fascinating that there's this whole behind the scenes world that happens without anybody even noticing, and there's no credit given to to that in the long run either. It's just, hey, I saw this cool product at the store, so I bought it. But what you're not realizing is it took a lot of work to get it to that store for you to buy.
Yes, to get somebody to say this is a cool product, if it is something, it's you have depending on what the product is, and if it's something that's in a grocery store or in a Walmart or a larger mall store, that there's going to be teams of corporate marketers, and maybe even advertising agencies that work under these corporate marketers.
Sure.
To put it all together, to give you that, you have countless numbers of people spending hours of their lives to get you to think that this product is cool, whatever the product is.
Well, the last thing, and then I'll let you go, is I wanted to ask you about the whole Boeing crisis. Those guys in their current situation with their jets failing and parts of their jets failing due to quality assurance issues, and they're teaming up with I forget Spirit Aerosystems. Obviously they're going to fix this to restore the customers' faith in them, because, like I said, there's people canceling their vacations specifically because they don't want to fly on a Boeing jet. Now, what part in this whole situation do you think marketing plays as far as their recovery, and return to service?
When I think about what's going on with Boeing, and in some design flaws that may cause a grave danger to people, depending on how it is assessed, it's going to be a classic. This is a good case study of classic crisis management response. So with Boeing, they don't necessarily answer to John Q. Public. Boeing sells their airplanes to various airlines, and then the people, if there are airlines that use Boeing, people are going to not take their vacation on an airline that has more Boeing in their fleet than Airbus or other types of jets.
Right.
So while it's not direct to Boeing, say as the classic example of crisis management was Tylenol, and they had a cyanide poisoning case, I believe, in 1982.
Yeah.
And that sort of made they sort of changed their packaging to make it less tamper proof and to make it more secure. And you've seen a lot of security seals on products, on basic consumer products since then. So Boeing is going to have to do something. Well, and with this. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but to that note, I was going to say that the whole Tylenol thing was a malicious act by a certain individual. So that wasn't even Tylenol's quality mistake, like we're talking about in Boeing. But they still were able to recover. So I kind of feel like, what you were saying, Boeing has to act on this, but there is a way back. There is a path back
So
to
yeah,
restore
Boeing,
faith.
Boeing, and if you use the classic crisis management thing that you hear about in marketing, you're often taught this in either in media studies classes, in marketing classes. You hear about what Tylenol did, and that is a case that somebody found a design flaw with Tylenol with a malicious intent,
Hmm.
and did the cyanide poisoning of Tylenol pills. So Tylenol had to fix their packaging to prevent, people with malicious intents from
Yeah.
poisoning Tylenol pills. Boeing, it's not quite the same. They have to, they have to figure out the design flaws on planes, and they're going to either have to recall the plane. They're going to have to keep planes in service, but recall them to fix the problem with them. Similar to automotive recalls, those
Sure.
happen sometimes.
All the time.
There are
All the time. Let's not
I was
let's
trying to
not
I was trying to be a little bit nicer about it,
let's not
but
kid
yes, okay, we
ourselves.
can go with all the time. So they're going to have to probably do some level of recall on the affected planes, or maybe they decide to take the planes entirely out of service, which would be very expensive and unlikely that they're going to do.
Right.
And then design planes that don't have flaws that make them more susceptible to catastrophes in the air. I think like the recall and repair is probably going to be the likely thing, and they're going to have to communicate with this recall and repair process what they're doing
Right.
and why it's going to make a difference for the airlines in safety.
And make that publicly a point,
Yeah.
make commercials about it. Hey, look what we're doing.
Yeah, they're going to have to do that. I mean, Tylenol did that with the classic cyanide poisoning case. There's going to be, most other brands, when there's a crisis, a brand that is wise really admits that they screwed up,
Sure.
and that they're going to take the following steps to correct the problem. There are brands that have experienced permanent issues because they didn't necessarily acknowledge a problem,
Sure.
and because they didn't acknowledge the problem, they didn't take the corrective steps to fix the problem, nor did they communicate the meaning behind the steps that they took to fix the problem. So basically, if there's a problem with your product, and it sounds like there is a problem with Boeing that could result in a catastrophic loss of life, what Boeing needs to do is acknowledge the problem, and find the science and engineering solutions to that problem, so as to no longer make it a problem, just like Tylenol did with the cyanide poisonings of their bottles, and
Right.
making the bottles more difficult to open. So Boeing has to figure out a way to, either recall the planes that are deficient and bolster them, or take those planes out of service,
Right.
and put in planes that address the design and that address the design and use malfunctions of those planes. Because really, who Boeing has to keep happy are the airlines. The airlines are either going to buy Boeing planes or they're not going to buy Boeing planes.
Right.
And the airlines are going to buy those planes
Based
based
on
on
demand.
how customers perceive Boeing planes. So let's say Delta Airlines buys Boeing planes. This is just a hypothetical.
Of course.
If Delta buys more Boeing planes and Boeing doesn't address that, customers are going to go to other airlines that have less Boeing in their fleet, and they're going to want to fly, the Airbus A320s, for instance.
Correct.
And that would affect, Delta's decisions to purchase Boeing planes in the future.
Well, I guess I'm asking more from a marketing standpoint, is how would marketing play a part in them recovering from this? Is there anything that marketing could do to help? Obviously, they're going to want to fix the problems or take those planes out of
Well,
service.
I mean, the stuff that I mentioned is the product side of marketing, but once you have the product side of marketing down, you have to promote what you did on the product side, to make it meaningful.
Okay.
And certainly the other, with price, the third P here. I mean, one of the ways that brands will actually, after a crisis and after crisis communications, work to win back the public is, they talk about the product changes that are going to benefit the customer and address the issue that existed before. They're going to promote that when, there may be pricing incentives to, to make up for this. There may be some pricing cuts that happen. Now, maybe Boeing to the airlines does sell a plane at a little bit less for a short period of time. Maybe they, that would be hard to do considering the cost of a plane. I mean, it's not like doing it's not like doing like buy two get one free on bottles of Tylenol.
Come on, man! I want to buy a 777 and get two 737s for free. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, if you were an airline purchasing manager, maybe, but that's not reality.
Yeah, I hear you. Let's move away from business for a little bit. Well, I mean, maybe business plays a part of this, but you and I have a common bond sort of over our love of Subarus. Now, you've been a Subaru guy much, much longer than I have. Tell me what got you into Subarus and how that maintained a place in your daily life.
So the first Subaru I had was an Impreza in high school. I was able to get this Impreza. My mom, bought a new Impreza for me when I was in high school. Lucky me, I guess. And she was taking a big risk because you buy an Impreza for somebody who's had their license for 6 months, and even though it is an Impreza, it is the bottom of the line one. That's still, there's still a risk that someone will mess it up. Now, at the time, I was in high school in Santa Fe, New Mexico, so I had, Santa Fe's got its 7,000-foot elevation, it's got its snow, it's got its ice. The driveway at my mom's place does have a pretty steep pitch to it, so going up my mom's driveway on a snow or an icy definitely requires either all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. So to start with the Impreza and get my feet wet while I was there in high school with it, that was a good thing. I had the Impreza till from 16 to 22.
Okay.
At that point in time, my grandparents had an Outback. I decided to upgrade from the Impreza to the Outback. It was going from a 99 Impreza to a 2000 Outback, and it wasn't an upgrade worth doing. I did it, and I held that 2000 Outback for from 2005 until the early part of 2024. And I recently got a new Legacy, so very few. The capabilities that I saw with it in snow and cold, both when I was in high school and in that period at the late 2000s, early 2010s in Santa Fe, I got to use the all-wheel drive for its intended capability in snow and ice. Now, I've also lived in the hot parts of Arizona and Dallas in that 24-year period. Really in those cities, you use it more in terms of its traction in the rain, or if you go off-roading somewhere in Arizona. Arizona's got a fair amount of off-roading.
Sure.
I mean, Texas, I guess, has some. I don't do it all that much. You'd have to go pretty far for it. But yeah, you see plenty of Subarus around Dallas, even though it's not necessarily one of Subaru's core markets. So I think part of the reason how Subaru has been able to, if you're talking specific to Dallas-Fort Worth, how it's been able to get a pretty good market share here, and I think it has to do with the quality, durability, the stories that people are taking these, like Toyota 200,000 and beyond. That's really what's changed for Subaru, and I think really the things that changed for Subaru really came in with in the early 1990s with a number of successful product launches. The Legacy launched around 1989-90, the Impreza in 93, the Outback was a sub variant of Legacy but spun off into its own model that started in 96. The the Forester in '97. All of these things did pretty well. Whereas, if you look at the history of Subaru pre 1990, it didn't. I don't think these products, the pre 1990 Subarus, were as good. Nor do I think they were. Nor do I think that they were marketed as well. I read an article in the Atlantic that was published, I believe, in 2016 about how Subaru changed some of their approaches to promoting the products that they had in their lineup after the 1990s and comparing it to pre-1990. There were some changes there, but I do believe when you talk about the mix of Subaru and what they've done differently. It has come down to some product changes, but really I think they promoted the brand differently, and they found the things that actually made Subarus good and made them appealing to a certain audience. They've managed to grow that audience in the last 20, 30 years.
Well, beyond safety and reliability. Now, you speak about a 200,000-mile car like that's the end of its life, but in reality,
No,
these things can go a million miles if you take care of them, maintenance them properly. Now, I will say that my biggest hesitation to Subaru has always been the head gaskets, because they tend to fail. Subaru makes a poor quality head gasket from the factory, and if anybody from Subaru is listening, you can make a huge difference in your car here. Just slap a multi-layered steel head gasket in there from the factory, and that eliminates that problem. That pretty much extends the life of that motor by significant proportions. So, like, if anybody out there is gonna buy a Subaru, the first thing I would recommend to them is swap that head gasket out, get a multi-layered steel gasket in there, and then it's something that you can just blow off. You don't have to worry about that anymore. It's not gonna fail on you. It's gonna be super reliable, and those things are tanks. Just proper routine maintenance.
The understanding that I had of Subaru's head gaskets, and keep in mind, on the 2000 Outback, I replaced one head gasket over time, so I know enough about this. But I thought the models that had the biggest problems with the head gaskets in Subarus were late 90s into the early 2000s. I thought by the 2010s that problem had been fixed.
It bled.
It has not been.
It bled well into the mid 2010s, so 2015, 2016. I think the generation ends at 2017, 2018 of those bad, poorly built head gaskets. And it's not so much a problem of the materials of the head gasket, it's the orientation. Because it's the boxer engine, it's sitting sideways. There's a lot of oil seeping into those gaskets that deteriorates them faster than they would a normal gasket. I mean, this is all opinion and speculation, but when you put the multi-layered steel in there, it's metal. It's not going to be affected the same way that the paper and carbon gasket is going to be affected. So you get a lot more life out of them.
This is bringing me flashbacks to 2013 when I was the Subaru's head gaskets and seeing what the I had the mechanics show me what the head gasket looked like at the time.
Yeah, they just deteriorate. And that's still a thing.
There was significant deterioration.
And that's still a thing. Like, I got a car that I gave my brother recently that was a Impreza hatchback. It's on my YouTube channel. Anyway, pulled the gaskets out of that thing, and it didn't even have a gasket problem. But, man, it was damn close. Like, if we had continued to drive that car, those gaskets would have blown out. I had I could just tell you story after story about those gaskets, but then you get the multi-layered steel gasket where you can get an entire head gasket kit that comes with a whole bunch of different gaskets, but it has the multi-layered steel gasket for like $50, and that fixes everything. Like, it's a lot of work, sure, but it's well worth the investment, because that's going to extend the life of your Subaru, and that Subaru equals safety and reliable transportation. So in my eyes, it's well worth the investment.
You've got to do that.
Sure.
If your car is of the vintage that has that error, you got to do the research to make sure that that it is. And then if you have that, you're gonna. One of the things that was great for me when I did the replacement of the head gasket 2013, is that I had read on the internet probably as far back as about 2008, 2009 that I knew that it was probably going to fail at some point, and I set money aside for that repair. So the day that it happened, as somebody who hasn't worked on my own cars, I knew it was coming. I knew it. I knew I'd have to deal with it sooner or later. The day it came, it was an expensive day, but at least I was prepared for it.
Absolutely.
At least, if you're not going to work on your own cars, at least research them and have a pretty good base of knowledge. And there was a time where I had I can think of a time where I had pretty rough idling. It was generally rough. It was generally rough idling, and I was thinking to myself, okay, what are the root causes of rough idling? You can have some spark plug issues. You can have some fuel pump, fuel filter issues, or you could have something like some sensor issues, mass inflow air take system, for instance.
Sure.
Any of those things could cause rough idling. So if you know that those are the potential causes, but you're not going to be the one who's going to be replacing the spark plugs or doing those things, at least be able to say, to make an educated guess and say to the place that's doing the repairs, okay, this is what I think is going to happen. Do with it what you will, but this is the symptom. These could be the causes. Actually, in that instance, it was the spark plugs that caused it, and I had a separate suspension issue at the time too.
Oh gosh. Well, and now a good thing to do, I would say, for future is have a friend like me close by, so you can get the work done much significantly cheaper.
In a lot of things, when you look at a repair shop, and they do the parts and labor breakdown, the parts depending on the repair, but I mean you can see that labor, and this is how they make money, and this is a great way to make money. I mean that's what they're in the business for. Labor can be somewhere between like 40-50% of a repair bill.
Oh yeah.
And I mean it's warranted. You really should you want to go to a repair facility that pays its technicians well.
Yes, sir. I'd agree. Yeah, I would.
If you're not paying that, that's a problem.
I would highly recommend staying away from the dealership, though. Only go to the dealership for warranty issues. The dealership is the worst about their markups. You're getting dealership quality products and dealership labor, but you're going to get the same labor somewhere else for a significant cost reduction. So, I'm not saying go to Joe Schmo on the corner of whatever street, but you could shop around repair shops because they're going to have people who know what they're doing. You're going to pay way less than the dealership, and it's going to be the same quality outcome. So, just do research.
I found a really good one that extended the life of my Outback for a long time.
That's great. I'm glad to hear it.
Even though I say 40 per maybe 40, maybe in a given repair 40% of the bill was labor, for instance, on the breakdown of one repair. Yeah, I mean that's I don't have you nearby. So
unfortunately, you know what I did want to bring up, which is nearby you, is my aunt has a rescue out in Justin, Texas, which is about 15 minutes north of.
I've been to Justin.
I
was actually just in Justin about 2 weeks ago.
My aunt has a huge dog rescue out there. She's been there for they're going on 12 years, I believe. They're having a little bit of struggle. They could use a marketing guy like you to to get some dogs adopted, but yeah, she's been there in Texas, in Dallas, Fort Worth for since I was a kid, since the 90s. But yeah, in the last 10 years they set up with a dog rescue, and they're doing really good things for that homeless dogs of Dallas and Fort Worth. So
in Justin is a really is a charming small town. So it's on the absolute outskirts of Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to go to a Mexican Tex-Mex place in Justin that was pretty good.
I've been there.
It's right by the railroad. I think you probably know the name of the place.
I don't remember the name, but I think the name of it was
Margaritas.
Something like that. We went for the 5-year anniversary of my aunt's rescue, to support her and the dogs, and yeah, she took us to eat there.
it's one of the main restaurants in Justin. So
It's one of the only restaurants in Justin.
we've both been there. Although for me it was only like 2 weeks ago.
What a
So,
coincidence! For me, it was about 7 years ago.
so I'm glad you went there. I mean, Justin is known for the Justin cowboy boots.
Yep, yep. There was a really big like raceway there too, like a speedway or something.
Yes, that's Fort Worth International. That's Fort Worth International.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a Texas Motor Speedway. Texas
Yeah.
Motor Speedway is the name of that. And that's at 35W in 114. That's the very northern reaches of Fort Worth, and then you just go a few miles beyond there, and you're in Justin.
So her rescue is really close to that motor speedway. I mean, not like next door or anything, but just within a couple miles of that motor speedway.
So when I was moving to Texas in 2011, I was coming into the outskirts of the Dallas Fort Worth area, probably about 10:30 at night, and I passed by Texas Motor Speedway, and in 2011 that area was not very well developed. Going out into that area in the last 2 to 3 years, like I did another drive between my mom's house in Santa Fe and Dallas, and that was December 2022. That was seeing how much had changed between summer 2011 and December 2022 out there. And now one of my friends lives a few miles away from Texas Motor Speedway off of 114, and that's why I went up to Justin as well that time a couple weeks ago. There's so much more out there than there was in 2011.
Wow.
Justin itself hasn't changed, but there's some of the other developments that I think are in Fort Worth city limits near there. There's been some growth out there. There's a town called Rome. It's a little bit west of the Speedway. That's
Okay.
Rome is at US 287 and Texas State 114. There's been some growth out there, and I mean it's about 45 miles from Rome to downtown Dallas. And you're just seeing how much population is in the Dallas Fort Worth area.
Expansive.
I think Dallas Fort Worth has added over the whole metroplex, and it depends on how you get into a definition there, but I think it's added over 1.5 million people in the 12 and a half years that it's been here.
Jeez. Now that brings me to another topic I wanted to ask you about. What's life in Dallas like? What are some pros and cons and good stuff like that? Tell me a little bit about your life there in Dallas.
Plenty, there's plenty to talk about in terms of what are pros and cons of living in Dallas. So, a major pro, for those in certain work fields, there's a lot of major corporate headquarters here. So for a lot of white collar workers, it's an appealing area because you have major corporate headquarters like AT&T, Texas Instruments, Southwest and American Airlines are headquartered here.
Yeah.
A lot of people who didn't necessarily grow up in an area that was economically dynamic or want to move to a bigger place. So you have a lot of great white collar work in Dallas. You have a lot of great corporate opportunities. Those are things that draw a lot of people in. That's probably for those who work in that field really good. If you're working in some other fields, Dallas may or may not be good from a working standpoint. It's probably not a bad choice. There are plenty worse places to work, even if you aren't in a place that has its corporate headquarters in Dallas. But that's
what would be one of those, for instance.
I mean, it really does depend on the job that you have.
Okay.
So, I mean, let me think of a job that would be pretty much the same. Say, if you lived in Dallas versus if you lived in like Charleston, South Carolina.
Service industry.
And there's plenty of jobs. Yeah, service industry. If you're working, if you're a cook at Applebee's, how much different is Dallas going to be than living in Charleston?
Fair enough.
Okay. That's other things that I think are pros of Dallas. recreation and entertainment. I mean, there's pretty much if you like going to pro sports, going to concerts, going to restaurants, every major national tours here in terms of concerts. Every major pro sports team is in Dallas. That's a thing for a lot of people.
Okay.
There's there's great restaurants, good nightlife if that's what you're into. A lot of people are critical of Dallas in terms of outdoor recreation, which I don't find true. It really is. It really depends on how interesting of a person you are, because you can play most sports in Dallas. I mean, there are tennis leagues, there are volleyball leagues. There's some outdoor biking opportunities, both road and mountain. It doesn't take it. Lake Texoma is only an hour up the road where you can go bass fishing. So there's a fair amount, and that's scratching the surface. There are other things that you can do besides the things that I just mentioned.
Sure.
There's plenty of gyms for indoor basketball, for instance. So yeah, you can, and there's a lot of people to meet. Decent social opportunities. So I think those are all pros. Cons. The first cons, we've talked about cars, traffic. There's a lot of traffic here, and it's gotten worse since I've gotten here.
It's a major metropolitan area. That's to be expected.
It's a major metropolitan area, and what has gotten worse about this is, in the early years that I was here, in the early to mid 2010s, outside of rush hour, you had a pretty good chance that as long as there wasn't somebody having an accident of being caught in a backup. Now I'm noticing many more backups in the last couple of years at really random times, like 10:30 a.m. on a Saturday without an accident, that there might be a backup. So that traffic is probably the biggest con that I can think of here. Cost of living has gone up a little bit over time. I mean, inflation has affected a lot of cities. Dallas is no exception to that. My rent when I first got here in 2011, I paid $724 a month in rent.
Ooh.
That was awesome. That was actually less than I was paying. That was less than I was paying at La Casa at the apartment we were in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
At the time, which as I was moving out, the base rent was $725, but they had really overpriced. What is it? All utilities covered.
Yes.
That was another $152 for a one bedroom at the time. So while the base rent was $725 versus $724 in 2011, because of the way the electric was done in the apartment I moved into in 2011 in Dallas, utilities were a little less expensive. So
wow.
I was living in a major city for probably about like $50 less a month.
Oh, that's great.
Then I was paying maybe 25 to 50 depending on summer electric bills versus winter electric bills in Dallas. But living there, it was there, and you had all of those exciting things that were in Dallas versus living in Santa Fe.
Sure. I'm sorry. Continue.
Yeah. Really. So traffic and cost of living are two major downsides.
Sure.
If you're in certain, for a lot of people, if you're dating in Dallas and if you're in certain segments, you'll find a lot of people have like there's a lot of superficial and pretentious attitudes, both with men and women.
That's unfortunate.
Men tend to have that complaint more about Dallas women than Dallas women have about men, but it is still applicable in both directions.
Absolutely. Wow.
So
okay,
those would be some of the things I would say are downsides in Dallas.
Okay, good information. You were playing tennis when we spoke last time. Is that something you still actively partake in?
I'm still doing it. I had knee surgery. I had a knee surgery for a torn meniscus 2 years ago. So
that's rough.
I'm not playing as much, but I'm still playing to some degree. Another thing. So that's affected my play in general now. Roger Federer had had this injury too. So not alone with it. Happens to tennis players. Happens to actually one of the best tennis players of all time. So I don't feel necessarily bad about that, but it makes it, after an arthroscopic surgery for a meniscal tear, which is not the most severe surgery you can have. Fortunately, there were no issues with my ligaments; those are worse surgeries. But it does affect your abilities to probably compete at the highest levels. In addition, so there are, I was playing in competitive leagues, throughout the 2010s and into the early 2020s. Since around the same time as my meniscal tear, some people who were at a similar skill level to me, we didn't play in league matches, but we played recreationally. There have been people who have moved, or people who have become new fathers of infants and toddlers and have less free time. So you talk about all those factors. I am playing less tennis than I used to. Still lifting weights. I'm swimming. I'm biking.
Oh wow.
I'm doing things, and I think I'm still trying to put together where tennis will be in my future. I'm not going to give it up. I'm playing less of it, but I still will play it.
Well, and
it really.
If worse comes to worse, there's always pickleball.
I don't anticipate playing pickleball. I mean, it is a much different game
Is
than
it really?
tennis, and there's a bit of a war going on between tennis players and pickleball players. I don't know how familiar you are with that.
I'm not at all.
But a lot of really passionate tennis players like myself are not really big fans of what's happened with pickleball, because pickleball, a lot of courts, both public courts and private courts, have been converted from tennis to pickleball, and even courts that were getting a lot of traffic from tennis players are being converted. I'll give you in public courts, there were these 8 public courts at they were 8 public tennis courts at Cole Park in Dallas. Pretty big. When they were all public tennis courts, there would often be lines to play tennis. And now 4 of those courts were made pickleball courts.
Damn.
In the mountains of Colorado at Beaver Creek, there was the Beaver Creek tennis facility there. They had 7 courts. 5 were clay courts and 2 were hard courts. Beaver Creek converted 2 of those hard courts into pickleball courts and kept the 5 clay courts as tennis courts. So it's something that has happened both, as I've shown here with actual examples, both public and private courts, and tennis players are not happy about this.
Well, is it? I was under the impression that pickleball is just a miniature version of tennis on a smaller half court. Isn't there some way that they can make, say, the pickleball net removable so it can still remain a tennis court and just be pickleball on certain hours or something like that? Like, isn't there some compromise?
There's some things that can be done. There are some times where you can put pickleball lines on tennis courts. The net sizes are a little bit different. So.
Sorry, I lost your audio.
Are a little bit different. Net sizes are a little bit different. So when you play, if you're playing pickleball with a tennis size net, that's going to be a little bit different than playing pickleball with a pickleball level net. There's a little bit of differences there. You can't, tennis, if you're playing like sanctioned league events, they won't let. The court has some certain specifications that it can't have pickleball markings on it. So, if those tennis courts are used for serious competitive leagues, then it can't share space with pickleball.
Okay.
And even with those, and I have played tennis on courts with some of the pickleball lines on it. It can be a little bit more distracting, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, totally.
Still good.
I feel like it's a decent compromise.
It's a decent compromise. It's a decent compromise for a recreational level tennis player.
Right. Are you into golf at all?
I have picked up golf clubs, for actual golf, not like miniature golf putt things, like maybe twice in my life. I don't really have any interest in golf. I don't foresee myself having interest in golf in the future.
Same, but got really into disc golf.
I've played disc golf. You want to hear about the one time I played disc golf?
Please, please.
I really like the idea of throwing discs of frisbee-like discs into holes and into these baskets.
Right.
And I played because I was going to. This actually is related to what we just talked about, because I was going to play tennis with a friend. And the tennis courts we were going to play at, we hadn't played at those courts in 2 years, and they were converted to pickleball courts.
Oh man.
And it's not like you could share space. They had the pickleball designation. So we had to find something to do that day. It was disc golf. It was the first time that I've ever played disc golf. And I tried to get through 18 holes. And by about the 14th or 15th hole, I was probably about like 45 to 50 over par. It was bad.
But it was also fun, I'm sure.
It was fun.
There you go. That's all that matters.
I do recall I did have at least one beer while playing disc golf.
Well, there you go.
But yeah, as a person who's somewhat competitive, I don't want to be 45 over par after 14 or 15 holes. That's not fun to me. Even if it is my first time and I'm not expected to be excellent at it, 45 over par is bad.
But that just shows how difficult it is as well. It's not something super easy, but it's also fun. It's not something that has to be a competition. It can be a fun time. So
it can be. I would have had more fun if I were, say, only like 20 over par as opposed to 45.
Well, it is what it is. Well, we've come to a part in the show that I'd like to ask you about your 10-year path. What's your plan for the future, the next 10 years, say?
So, one of the things that I've learned over the course of 16 years in marketing is that it's hard to make a 5 or a 10-year plan and have it go to fruition, and have it come out as you would expect it to come out.
Well, let's just talk hypothetically. What ideally would you like the outlook of your future? What does that look like?
I would like to get to a director or vice president level of marketing. I haven't gotten there yet.
I'll support that.
If you can get there, great. If I don't get there, life will go on. I don't. One of the things that I've learned in my career, and I learned this probably. I learned this from seeing my father, and I've learned this from seeing other people who were probably too devoted to their work. Is I work to live. I work. While I'm passionate about the work that I've done, and we've shown that passion over the course of this episode. What's really more important to me are the relationships with others, how I spend my leisure time, stuff like tennis, stuff like some of the automotive things I'm interested in, cooking, all those other things really bring the time you spend with your family. That brings more meaning to your life than most occupations will. I mean, yeah, there are some situations where an occupation just brings a lot of meaning to somebody.
Sure.
But for me, I've used my work as a way to enhance my leisure time. I'm all about working to live, and I'm all about how is my work going to fit into the overall equation of my life.
That's great.
So
and
I think that's really important for all of us.
Now, aside from let's move away from the business side of it. What does the personal aspect of your next 10 years look like for you? You've said that you have no intention of moving out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You're comfy where you're at. Let's talk maybe personal relationships. I know you are not unlike myself, where kids is off the table. You have no interest in those. So what about personal relationships? Maybe growth as far as purchasing a house, things like that. Does any
I think
of
there's
that?
a good possibility. I am a renter right now.
Right.
I think there's a good possibility that I will purchase a condo at some point. I don't know if I live alone, do I want to be somebody who does, as part of the overall equation of my life that I was just talking about? Do I want to be doing outdoor work in my free time?
Okay.
The answer is I'd probably be leaning towards no. So I think I would, if I were to purchase something, it would be like a condo or a townhouse. It might be a condo and a high rise.
Okay.
We'll see.
How about?
Maybe.
I'm sorry. Proceed.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, how about world travel? Does that ever fit into? Do you have any desire to do that, or is that more something along the lines of a retirement plan?
So I did a lot of good travel during childhood, more domestic than international, but some international in there. I've never really felt a major need to do international travel, and
Okay.
I have somewhat of an unconventional opinion. I have two unconventional opinions about travel and vacation. So the first unconventional opinion that I have about travel or vacation is a lot of things are actually better on YouTube or a streaming service video than they are actually going to it. I'll give an example of this. You go to Yellowstone National Park in the summer, it's crowded, maybe Grand Canyon as well. Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon, it's crowded, it's miserable. Other people, you have other tourists are interfering with it. Maybe watching some videos that were professionally shot of Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon is better than actually, going there, going through the airports, going through security, going through flights. Maybe it's better to do that. And maybe that's true for certain international destinations. It's difficult to say. I mean, you have to consider a lot of factors
Yeah,
with
sure.
that. So that's one somewhat unconventional take that I have on travel and vacations. The other unconventional tactic or belief that I have on vacations are that sometimes the absence of activity and doing nothing is better than some stressful out of town trip where you maybe you go to Yellowstone and your kid gets lost in Yellowstone, or there are some other unruly tourists who ruin time, or you go on some boat trip in Hawaii and the boat trip gets canceled because some other passenger on the boat gets unruly due to having too many Mai Tais and you can't see as many dolphins because of that. Other people can ruin your vacation pretty easily. Now,
That's true.
if you stay home and rest, that absence of activity can actually recharge you and make you feel better about yourself for a lot less money than
Okay,
going on a
that's fair.
vacation.
Well, I will say
So,
that we went to Egypt the
mhm.
beginning of 2023, and it was phenomenal. That's one that I would say should be a bucket list for everybody. It's the YouTube videos are good, documentaries are great, but there's this different feeling you get from standing there in the presence of these ancient things that are just so amazing to look at. And it's more than that. You can actually get away with planning a vacation where you avoid all the crowds. Now, we, being our first time there, we kind of did the tourist thing and we got stuck with most of the crowds at most of the places we were at. But there was a couple of things, like we went back to Abu Simbel a second time, and on the second trip back, there was nobody there. It was phenomenal. We had this whole ancient site to ourselves pretty much. There was maybe, I don't know, no more than 20 people there in total. So we had free range to walk through these things, take our time. There was no pressure, there was no crowds. It was fucking amazing. And you can get that at every site in Egypt. So, if you, it takes work, but you can plan these trips to where they benefit you the most. On the aspects of all the negatives that you were saying. So
Yeah, if you can do something like that, that's great. If you can go to the Grand Canyon in late September instead of during peak summer season,
exactly.
you're probably going to have a better time at the Grand Canyon. And it's probably, if the only chance you have to go to the Grand Canyon is, say, during like a long weekend around the 4th of July,
That's a
you're probably
bad.
better off watching it on YouTube. But if you can go
Yeah.
in late September, early October and have less of a crowd, you're probably going to have a better time, and it would probably
Absolutely.
justify, no matter how long you have to travel to get there, it would probably justify that trip. So yeah,
Sure.
timing is everything on a lot of these travels.
Okay, and jumping back into it, I kind of sidetracked you, but what does the personal relationship look like for you maybe in the next 10 years? Is that something you're still actively seeking, or are you comfortable with the situation the way you have it?
As far as my personal relationships go, I have a good base of friends here. You know, I'm pleased with those. Certainly, some of those friendships would probably change out over 10 years. People will move somehow. I tend to have longer term friends like you,
Yeah,
and there are many examples of that. So I do a pretty good job with that. So I think a lot
absolutely.
of the people who I'm friends with, I expect to be friends with in 10 years, so long as we're both living. That would be great. We both hope
Absolutely.
that we're living.
Absolutely.
Uh, so I think that'll be a thing in my life in 10 years. As far as longer term romantic relationships, I am unmarried right now. It's do I think I can do I think I can take a relationship out to say, let's say I start one today, could I take it out to 7 or 10 years under the right circumstances? Possibly. Um, I think a lot of one thing that does happen in a lot of personal relationships, it doesn't matter whether it's a non-marital relationship or a marriage, a lot of relationships do tend to go sour after about 5 to 10 years. There's a lot of data to support this. The median length of a marriage that fails is about 7 years.
That's
And
weird.
it's not, and that doesn't mean it's a 7 year relationship. It means it's, if you take into consideration the time before the marriage and it failing at 7 years, that's about a 10-year relationship. So a lot of relationships fail for a lot of reasons, but a lot of them. One simple way to think about why they fail is that it's just it's not as good for either partner anymore. People change, situations change, behaviors change. People's annoying habits get more annoying over time.
Okay.
So
All right.
all those things can happen, and all those things can stop a relationship from going really far. Or the another bad thing that can happen, you can have a relationship that lasts for 10 years, but if you've been miserable for 7 or 8 of them,
Sure.
so what if you had that 10 years of
Right.
longevity and quality are not the same thing. we've
Right.
got to we've got to stop, as a culture, and a lot of people overstate the longevity aspect of relationships as some sort of meaningful way to measure a relationship. It really isn't. It's the quality of the days that are spent in whatever duration that you're in that matter more than the total duration.
Okay, I'm with you. I would have to agree. All
Mhm.
right. Well, I have taken up enough of your time. You've been super generous with it, so I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation, and there is so much more that we didn't even get to touch on. So I'm gonna have to have you on for a second episode. I hope you're okay with that.
I am definitely okay with that.
Great,
So I
great.
look forward to it. Thanks so much for the time today.
No, thank you, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye. Police going in the background?
Yeah, I do, and apparently, I'm a few buildings away from a major thoroughfare, so
Oh, nice.
the fact that those sirens must be loud. All right,
Welcome, everybody, to another episode. Today, I have another special guest, as always, my good friend David Mitchell. David, how you doing?
doing great. Thanks for having me on the program.
No, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate it. So, let's get started with a quick catch up. You and I, we've known each other for several years now, well over 10. Um,
Yes.
we met through our apartment complex in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we hit it off through a swimming pool meeting. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And you know what I really liked about the swimming pool in that apartment complex is that it had a really good deep end. In a lot of newer apartment complexes, and that complex was built around the late 1960s, early 1970s, you get to pools that were built after 1990, and you don't have the good gradual downhill into a deep end that some of those older pools have. So I really appreciated it about that pool and that complex.
Well, and beyond that, it was a heated pool and heated quite well, I might add.
Yes, it was.
So, we hung out a little bit in Santa Fe prior to us moving out of the complex, and then you making a bigger move. Tell us where you moved.
So in 2011, I left that complex in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I went to Dallas, Texas. I've been in Dallas for the last 12 and a half years. It's been a lot of adventures here. I think any time that you spend 12 years in any city, it's worked out pretty well for you. Otherwise, if it wasn't working out, you would have moved somewhere else by now.
Isn't
So
that a fact?
there were some times in the early years in Dallas where I wondered, did I make the right move? Is this living up to the expectations that I set when I moved in 2011? And there were some moments where I had some doubts about the move, and I had some doubts about whether or not it was the right decision in my life. But ultimately, by sticking it out, it did end up working out. I like living here. I don't have any intentions to move right now. It's been a good 12 and a half years.
That's great. Um, you've I want to talk about your work a lot. You've
Okay.
been in your field for as long as I've known you, and I'm assuming several years beyond that.
Yeah, I'd say I entered my field in 2008. We met in 2010, so a
Okay.
little bit beyond that. So, this year is 16 years in marketing, and I've had a number of different roles within marketing. Some have been. So marketing's a pretty big discipline with the four P's of marketing: product, place, price, and then I know I'm forgetting someone: product, place, price, and promotion. The big one where you get where that gets that gets sort of all of the glory in marketing.
Sure.
But there's a lot of marketing jobs that only touch like one or two of those four P's. I've had some jobs that touched all of them in managing a brand. I've had other jobs that were market research, which was sort of like the baseline knowledge that brand managers used to make decisions about how to guide a brand or product to profitability.
Interesting. Now, can you go a little deep? I mean, maybe into one specific job that you've had in the marketing field. Maybe tell me about your favorite one.
Okay. It's hard to say. It's hard to pick a favorite because there were, every job had some elements that I really liked, and every job had some elements that I didn't
Well,
like.
and so, sorry, not to interrupt, but on that note, like you truly enjoy marketing, right? You love your field.
I do. It's been good to be in it. Could I have been happier somewhere else? It's anything is possible, but
Yeah, of course.
overall, I made a pretty good decision.
Okay. Now tell me about that. Tell me about your one that you would say stands out over any other job.
So something that I would say my time at a company called Parks Associates from 2014 to 2018, where I was involved in market research for larger consumer technology brands. Parks had some pretty major names in consumer technology at the time as clients, and a lot of the fundamentals that I used in that job in research, I'm using in my current job as a marketing manager for a bank where I have market research responsibility. So it's a very foundational job that I had. And there were some very exciting things that happened. I remember one time, I believe it was in 2015 or 2016, I was reading the Wall Street Journal one morning, and I was reading about one of our clients made a brand decision that sounded like it was they adopted one of the strategic recommendations from our research, and all of the research that was done there was based strongly on data. That's the thing that I like about market research, is that it is strongly data based, objective, and it tries to eliminate as much subjectivity as possible. You can never eliminate subjectivity 100%,
Okay.
but when you are making cases to do things based on data, facts, and facts, you cannot argue facts as much as you can argue feelings. And I do like that. I do like that about the quantitative aspect of marketing. And I mean, as far as marketing goes, market research is the closest to the science, technology, engineering, mathematics, the STEM acronym.
Yeah.
So in STEM is very it's very much based all of those things, science, hard science, mathematics. There are rules of mathematics that you must be followed.
Right. Otherwise, it doesn't
There's
work.
otherwise it doesn't work. So that's that quantitative element of marketing that you only get really from market research within marketing is something that I really enjoy. And a number of my jobs have been more quantitative, and I appreciate that.
That's great. What's sort of, I would say, like, maybe, I guess, what's the payout, or what is the rewarding feeling that you get when somebody takes what you've done and actually puts it into use?
I mean, the rewarding feeling is that if you're working for like a third party agency like Parts Associates that was got hired by clients, you would get if the research was good and it made a difference in the client's outcomes, they would continue to buy research. It might affect your bonuses. It might
That's great.
affect a few other. And, there's a number of different ways that you can do it. In my current role with a bank, one of the things that I do right now, in seeing how research gets adopted, is I set up studies of our customers. You can also set up studies of prospects as well. It's the same general idea. And if the bank's executive management decides to take the recommendations that from the research that I've designed and lead, then we see a difference in bank operations, and the customers see a difference as well. You want to create everything in marketing really is dependent upon having a customer that is perceives value in the offering and is satisfied or even delighted
Sure.
by their experience with the brand. It doesn't really matter what the product category is. You can give examples from pretty much any product category where customers are really, really excited about their decision to buy a product. I mean, think about people with Toyota and Lexus. They're generally pretty excited about the reliability and the ability for those vehicles to last beyond 200,000. That's a big reason why you would buy. That's a big reason why you would buy one of those two brands.
Sure.
And in every brand, you can pick automotive. You can pick you can pick cosmetics, you can pick food. It doesn't really matter, but there's got to be some sort of audience that perceives value in it and is just satisfied and delighted by purchasing it. And for some reasons, you've got to tap into something like that. So research is the foundation of good brand decisions. And if you get the research right and you base your brand based on certain principles that are going to make a difference in the market and lead to that sense of and that perception of satisfaction and delight, that's where market research and that's where marketing in general becomes magical.
That's crazy. That's really deep to think about. And then these are things that most people don't think of ever in their entire life. But you think about these things every single day, and marketing is in any product that's sold any kind of nationally or internationally. There's a marketing team behind that product. Like,
yes,
every
there
field,
is.
every industry, there's marketing for everything, and that's great. I recently put you in touch with somebody who's just a private party who's looking for marketing, and he's just a dude. Like he doesn't have a business, he just has a product and he needs to figure out how to get it out there. And hopefully that becomes a fruitful venture for both of you.
One of the things that I've said many times over the course of my career in marketing is that I've said that marketing is the lifeblood of any organization. I don't know how original that thought is. I don't know if I'm the only person to say it. I've said it enough. I've said it in job interviews. I've said it on the job. It is what it is, and it's really true, because if you don't have the four P's of the marketing mix that I mentioned earlier,
Sure.
if you don't have those working well and working in conjunction with one another, whatever it is that you're offering is just not, it's not going to make a difference in the market. It's not going to achieve the level of sales that that ownership management want it to achieve.
Sure.
The other elements of business won't be as bountiful without good marketing. And a sales department needs good marketing too, because marketing and sales, a lot of times, one of the bigger misconceptions about business in general is that marketing and sales are basically the same. They are complementary functions. They are not the try being a sales rep in a company that doesn't have any marketing support. Before getting into marketing, I had some experiences in sales, in organizations where sales and marketing weren't aligned. It wasn't a good time. It's not a good time either for marketing when sales reps aren't really emphasizing what marketing thinks that needs to be emphasized.
Sure.
If they're cutting the prices, that's affecting the perception of the brand. If they're doing those unauthorized things, yes, that's going to have issues. So the relationship between a sales department and a marketing department, you go on and on about how important it is for those two departments to work well together, because if they don't, and if one side is carrying the weight and the other one isn't, it's going to be bad either way.
That's crazy, because from a consumer standpoint, you don't think of any of that. Like none of that has ever crossed my mind, only in conversation with you. I've never walked into a store and been like, what is the history of this product? How did it come to be? How did it get its attention? Like, and it's not until I actually sit down and have conversations with you that I like realize that anything that's valid in our modern society has had people like you and others, on a sales side, working together to bring that product to light and get it's the attention it deserves to make those sales. That's that's a really deep thought.
Yeah, I mean, the fun part of marketing is the deeper thought stuff. The less fun parts of marketing there's a lot of minutia that goes into some of these fun deep thoughts. I mean, I get energized with these fun deep thoughts, and I think the majority of marketers do. The thing that a lot of marketers probably find frustrating is some of the minutia that it takes to actually execute some of the deeper parts of it.
Sure.
Let's say I'll give an example on this. Mostly every company has a website right now, because a website is a key promotion channel for pretty much all brands at this point. So, and there's a lot that goes into into even a simpler website, but the more complex a website gets, the more minutia there is. You're trying to do stuff to get to rank in the search engines higher than the next brand in your space. You might be designing, you might be making slight tweaks to some of the code that goes into that website pages that Google's crawlers will read, so that you rank one space ahead of somebody. To do some of that stuff, there is a lot of minutia in there that can be, for a lot of marketers, that can be not fun.
I bet. And
I'm trying to talk about the not fun things in the most brief way that I can.
Well, because it's not fun. So yeah, that makes total sense. I want to ask you about your experience on podcasts, because this isn't your first rodeo, is it?
No, I've had the experience to be on a lot of different podcasts, dating all the way back to around 2009, 2010.
That is fucking
So
insane. I can't believe
it
we've never had
is.
this conversation before because when you were on podcasts, they were babies. That was still the
Yes.
early days of podcasting. Tell me about some
One
of
of
your
the things
podcasts.
one of the things that so in the days before podcasts really got big, a lot of people would try to get on on terrestrial radio shows, television as guest experts, so on and so forth. And it was really hard in the 2000s to do that before podcasts took off. And then what has so I mean, as somebody who was fairly new in marketing and wanting to get known as an expert in the field, one of the things that I was doing, especially at that time when I was operating my own business and trying to bring in clients, I had to brand myself. I had to promote myself. That's one of the 4 Ps of marketing.
Sure.
Making appearances on podcasts was a part of what I did at the time before going back to some corporate roles. And it wasn't it was something that was good to do. I was on a bunch of different business podcasts. I've also been on I've been on terrestrial radio. I've never done like over the air television. I've never made an appearance on like CNBC or Fox News or Fox Business or CNN or any of that.
Hey, well,
But
never
at this
say
point,
never.
with all of the cord cutting and cord shaving that's gone on over time, the value of making an appearance on those is less than it would have been, say, 14, 15 years ago.
Absolutely.
I mean, it still has value and prestige. Okay, you say that you did a like a 5-minute segment on CNBC. That still has some value. You'll probably still use that on your own YouTube page to show, hey, I did something really cool. I was on CNBC.
Right.
The combination of doing various podcasts on a variety of topics and some terrestrial radio has really helped me, and it's helped me in terms of speaking in the most soundbite fashion possible. One of the things that you learn by making appearances on podcasts, most digestible ways, and to create meaningful sound bites. So I think I've mastered that in 10 plus years. I don't think my early appearances on podcasts were terrible appearances, but I think that I've learned to speak in a more soundbite friendly way over time.
I'm gonna have to say that as long as I've known you, you've been very articulate in your speech. You're a super knowledgeable guy, and it's impressive the things that you know and the way you portray them in an understandable and interesting way. It's
Oh yeah,
very
you've got to
impressive.
be able to speak in those ways, in a way that people are going to to understand and engage, no matter what you're speaking about. It doesn't really matter. The passion for it has to come through, no matter what you're talking about.
Yep.
If you're talking about rebuilding engines, passion's got to come through. Talking about if you're like a big name fashion designer and you're talking about some sort of like design trend in fashion, you got to speak in a way where it's exciting to your audience. It doesn't really matter what it is. The people who do the best on podcasts, in sales, in marketing, are the people who have excitement and who have and who can speak in a convincing way. One of the things I got to sit in once when we were interviewing, and I was only a research analyst there. I wasn't a hiring manager at the time, but I got to, because I had been this is probably about 3+ years into my 4 years there. I was probably about like 6 to 9 months before I left, if I remember the timeline accurately. But one of the things that I thought about in terms of, as I was sitting on the other side of the hiring table, not being the interviewee, interviewing someone,
Wow.
is trying to look for how passionate they are about the subject matter. Because especially in a heavy data job, where there's a heavy data job has a lot of minutia, that the passion's got to carry you through some of those projects. So when I was asking questions, I was trying to see how passionate people were data, because even in my own interview, at the time, 3+ years earlier, I was trying to make the case that my passion for data was going to make me a good analyst, and it was going to translate to better research that the clients are going to be happier with.
That's great information for interviewees. The people should take that to heart. Any of you listeners out there, listen to this man and save that in your memory bank for next time you have a job interview. That's good, solid advice.
Yeah, and try to if you want to get something quick about job interviews. There's two acronyms and formats for answering interview questions. They're called the STAR format: situation, task, action, result, or PAR, problem, action, result. So talk about the situation or task or the problem first. Talk about the action you took, and talk about the result of the action.
Okay.
That that using that format, they teach that form. They do various career consultants, various you might see it in college, grad school, maybe even trade school. If they don't teach it in trade school, it ought to be something that's taught ought to be taught at any level of it ought to even be taught in high school. That's situation, task, or problem, then the action you took, and the result it generated. The result it generated is, how is this all meaningful? The action you took is, shows your abilities, in the situation and task really just sets up the action.
Perfect. That's sound advice as well. While we're on the topic of business, I want to get your thoughts on Boeing. While we're at it, like, they've been in the news a lot lately, negatively primarily. And what are your thoughts on maybe a recovery for them? Because at the present time, there's people like replanning their vacations and looking specifically into their flights on their vacations to avoid Boeing airplanes. When, if you look at I don't know, maybe statistically, the likelihood of something eventful happening to your flight is pretty much slim to none still, even though there has been and continue to be many small incidents. A lot of people are taking that as a major threat. Now, is this something that you think Boeing is going to be able to recover from, and what does the process of them recovering look like?
So before I illustrate what is a classic, what I think is going to be an answer about a classic crisis management response. So the problem right now with Boeing in the news is that there have been some, there's been an identification of some flaws that are causing Boeing planes not to operate in the way that they're supposed to operate. There,
Right.
maybe parts are coming apart, right?
Right.
Okay, so the Boeing has been making planes for decades. They've been making planes. I don't know the exact number without looking at it, but decades is a generic enough answer to be correct.
That is absolutely correct.
So Boeing has a pretty good track record in making planes. So I mean, now that helps them. That's the situation. So the what's going on here is certainly there might be something that is being shown that has been an inferior design part of Boeing airplanes, and the flying public doesn't want to take Boeing airplanes.
Right.
And then this is so the classic crisis management to this came from Tylenol in the early 1980s, when there was some sort of poisoning of I think it was a cyanide poisoning of Tylenol pills in the bottles. So what Tylenol did at that point in time, and this is everywhere now, those harder to open, like childproof